The National League Championship Series has been decided. The AL Championship Series going to a divisive Game 7 tonight. But you know us, we can't stop thinking about the Reds. That's right. Today, special edition Chatterbox Reds, we're grading Tito. That's right. Nick Kirby, Craig Sandlin, Chatterbox Reds. Tonight is all about our thoughts on Terry Francona's first year at the helm of the Cincinnati Reds. Nick, how was your weekend? Happy Monday to you.
I'm doing good. Hope you're doing well as well, Craig. Big win for the Cincinnati Bengals on Thursday night. You guys did a great job with the coverage for that on Chatterbox Bengals. But yeah, looking forward to those listening tonight. Looking forward to a Game 7 in the ALCS. You never know. Sometimes you get like these crazy moments that are long-time baseball, and hoping our guy Eugenio Suarez can have one of those moments. That'd be pretty fun.
That'd be cool. It's in Toronto, so like your immediate flashbacks are to Bautista's gigantic home run in Toronto in whatever year that was and how crazy that was. And you just think about the atmospheres and everything. I mean, this whole postseason's been crazy. Seattle obviously desperate to get back or get to the World Series. Toronto, great fans there as well. So it's going to be a fun Game 7 for sure, and you know that those Toronto fans are going to bring it.
Yeah, they've had some big moments. Edwin Encarnacion had a home run in a wild card game, one that was like a marathon game where I remember who was the Orioles skipper, one of the old school dudes. Buck Showalter refused to pitch his closer. It goes like the 14th inning, and he brings out a ball to Jimenez. Edwin Encarnacion hits one 5,000 feet. And then, of course, Joe Carter. We weren't old enough to like remember that, but one of, I think, 2 World Series walk-off clinchers. It was Game 6, not Bill Mazeroski for the Pirates back in the 60s. But yeah, they've had some big moments. Be cool to see Seattle get to the World Series just because they've never been, but Toronto hasn't been in a long time, so that'll be fun. Craig, I'm going to ask you this. My heart is rooting for, obviously, whoever wins against the Dodgers. But I got to be honest, the longer this goes, my head's just kind of like, it might just be best if the Dodgers just win and they win again next year and we go into the CBA with like everything stacked against
it's
the Dodgers.
The amount of videos that you're going to get in 2027 when the lockout starts of Dave Roberts saying, let's win 4 more and really ruin baseball. You're going to see so many clips of that when the lockout actually happens, which seems to be like inevitable at this point. There's no doubt that there's going to be some level of lockout. Now, will they start the season on time? Who knows? But
there's 0% chance 2027 starts on time.
This is definitely lining up to be a brutal negotiation. And it's funny though, Nick, because you see the videos and the stats out there of recent about talking about how the Dodgers have already made back all of Shohei Ohtani's contract, $700 million, and they made it back in year 1 through marketing negotiations and exposures and all these other things. So that's certainly going to be on the owners' minds of, well, we don't need a salary cap because look at all this revenue that we're generating because of these players. Why would you want to cap their earnings? And it'll be funny because the owners, some of the owners are going to want the salary cap, I think, and then some of them are going to be adamantly against it. But you look at one of the arguments for it, and I don't know enough of the data behind it, but one of the arguments for a salary cap is the whole idea of the other leagues with a salary cap are growing exponentially in value as franchises versus MLB, which has been kind of stagnant, which is also interesting from the owner's perspective. So this is not a lockout episode. We don't have to get into all of that, but Game 7 on later tonight is definitely going to be fun, and going up against 2 Monday Night Football games. So viewership will be spread out. It'll be interesting to see what kind of viewership the Mariners and Blue Jays get later tonight. The AFL is going on its way as well. A handful of Reds out in Arizona for the Fall League. Before we get into our thoughts on Terry Francona, any updates from Arizona and how things are going out there, Nick?
Yeah, some good and some not so good, but we'll start with the good. Cam Collier, he's looked great, hitting 320, 500 on base percentage, just hit a home run this week, also has a pair of doubles so far. Alfredo Duno only has 17 at-bats, but has a 391 on-base percentage, 5 walks. This dude just walks. I think for Duno, it's more about the experience than really the playing or anything with him. But a guy that it is about the playing is Leo Balcazar, and he's answered the bell, hitting 353 in 34 at-bats. Craig, that is the most on the team on Peoria and the second most in the entire Arizona Fall League. So I don't know if that's the Reds pushing for him to get a lot of at-bats, but kind of feels that way. Also on Saturday, 2 balls hit over 106. So Leo Balcazar definitely trending, at least at this point, towards maybe a guy the Reds decide to protect in the Rule 5. That'll certainly be something to watch. On the pitching side, Rhett Lowder made his second appearance on Saturday. He allowed 1 run over 2 innings, 2 strikeouts, did not walk anyone. Hit 95.3. Most of his pitches up about a mile to 2 miles per hour, so velo up a little bit from his first start. Slider was really good, 3 whiffs on 7 swings. Tough day for Trevor Kunsel on Saturday. He gave up 3 hits and a run. He had looked pretty good in his first 2 appearances prior to that. Luke Hayden, oh boy, he struggled on Sunday, walked 5 batters. It's been a struggle for him. And then Hunter Parks, we haven't seen him, I think, in about over a week. So that is your latest AFL update. No games on Monday.
Yeah, a good interview with Alfredo Duno put out the other day by our friends over at Just Baseball, RM Layton out in Arizona. In-person interview with Alfredo Duno talking about his focus throughout the Arizona Fall League. And make sure you check out Chatterbox Sports' social media channel for a congregation of all of the media from Arizona Fall League and all Cincinnati sports, of course. But Nick, let's get into the main event, and that is the grading of Terry Francona's first season. We go back to, I don't know, it was around this time last year when we were getting on a live stream to talk about Terry Francona as the new manager of the Cincinnati Reds. I went all out. I donned my World Series, 1990 World Series hat. I was stoked to get Terry Francona back in the league and managing the Reds, but after year 1 of Terry Francona, are we still feeling the same? Do we have our doubts? We'll talk about all of that. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But Nick, let's start with your overall thoughts of year 1 with Terry at the helm.
Yeah, over a year. The news came out October 3rd. Press conference was October 7th last year. So we were already deep into
seems like just yesterday.
Yeah, it does. It does. I wanted to wait a couple weeks before we did this. This was not something I wanted to do the day after the season to really kind of process my thoughts, because they're very complex on Francona. And I've talked to a lot of people that I really trust that, boy, they love Terry Francona, so that's always something that I try to weigh everything I can. I'll say this about Tito. When I watch the games and, like, you're in the middle of the games, my God, this guy drove me absolutely insane. Felt like whenever there was, like, an off day, I was like, you know what, Francona's not that bad, you know? But, like, the next day when the game started, like, oh, my God, he did it again, you know? And so it's very complex with Francona. And I think probably a lot of Reds fans feel that way probably as well.
Yeah, it is. I think complex is probably a good way to put it, right? You look at a Hall of Fame manager, a guy who has World Series titles under his belt, and, you know, he's managing the way he knows to manage. And so the question becomes, can that way win a World Series in 2026 or beyond? And that'll be the real question, is how does the Cincinnati Reds team, who is young and not likely to spend the kind of money that Terry had at his disposal in Boston. Obviously, Cleveland was a little bit different, but can he get back to the promised land? And can the Cincinnati Reds win their first postseason series in a long, long time? And, you know, part of me wants to say, look, Terry's a Hall of Fame manager, trust in the process, understand that he's known more about this game than I'll ever hope to think I know. And to sit here and question him as much as we have and we do is tough, because you want so much success for the team. But the truth of the matter is that, as you said, watching day in and day out, it really becomes tough. And we're going to get into some of it, but let's start on the positive side, Nick. I know the negative side is going to be probably a little bit easier for Reds fans at this point in the season than maybe the good. So let's start this video with some good stuff from Terry Francona. Give us your top 3 positives from year 1 of Terry Francona.
Well, the first one, and this is by far a mile further than anything else, and probably the one reason I wouldn't almost give Francona a grade of an F. So spoiler alert, I'm not going to give him an F if you're expecting that. Defense. The Reds defense took a massive leap in 2025, and I feel like it's only going to get better. I know a lot of people don't value defense. I do. I've been a guy that has. I've been on shows year after year after year saying the Reds got to improve their defense. Reds got to improve their defense. Reds got to improve their defense. Well, they finally did in 2025, and I think Francona isn't the only reason for that. I think the Reds decided to play different players, but the more I read and see and think about Francona, I think he's pulling a lot of the levers. So he was responsible for that, and he, for the most part, didn't take shortcuts on that. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But let's just preface this with how bad the Reds defense was, okay? So we'll start with the outs above average. In 2019, the Reds were a really good defensive team. They were plus 26 outs above average. That was the year they had Jose Iglesias at shortstop. Adam Duvall was a really good outfielder. They had Tucker Barnhart on the plate. Really good defensive team. And then it went to hell in a hurry. 2020, Craig, the Reds were minus 12. That was a short season, 60 games. 2021, they were minus 36. How about their outfield? Minus 22 alone, the outfield of Jesse Winker, Tyler Naquin, and Nick Castellanos. Craig, that was 10 worse than any other team in baseball. 10 outs worse than any other team in baseball. 2022 was minus 20. 2023, minus 35. It did get a little bit better last year in 2024. They were minus 14th. That was still 22nd in baseball. And this year, Craig, people might not think a plus 0. I'm going to call it a plus 0. I don't know if it's I'm calling it plus 0. They're not going to think that's
we'll go plus.
But, man, when you look at a team that was dead last they were actually ranked 15th, right in the middle of the pack. That's a big step in the right direction. Oh, and by the way, in September, they were plus 6. The Mets were atrocious in September. One of the reasons the Reds made the playoffs was because of their defense in September and versus the Mets defense. But just real quickly, defensive runs saved, just because I like to give both sides, because I think both have some validity. I prefer outs above average. Defensive runs saved, the Reds were plus 48 in 2019. Then they gave them plus 3 in 2020, but then, boy, they killed them. Minus 42 in 2021, minus 34 in 2022, minus 34 again in 2024. Then this year, they graded them plus 2. So, I mean, when you're going from a team that's minus high 30s to plus 2, that is a massive, massive leap. And that was only with a couple months of a guy like Brian Hayes, who I think is probably the best defender in baseball. So there's reason to believe that the Reds can be a legitimate top 10, if maybe not even like a top 5 team defensively in 2026.
Yeah, I think it's, first of all, you've got 2 Gold Glove finalists in Spencer Steer and Brian Hayes. And you mentioned Brian Hayes, maybe the best defender in all of baseball, certainly going to be up there for the Platinum Glove award this year. There's no doubt about that. The last time the Reds had 2 Gold Glove finalists was that 2020 season, which was, the shortened season, but that was Tucker and Shogo Akiyama. So how about a couple of throwback names there? And then the last time the Reds won 2 Gold Gloves in a single season, which I don't know if Spencer Steer will win it or not. Brian Hayes, we think, is kind of a lock at this point. But if Spencer Steer does win the first baseman Gold Glove, the last time the Reds had 2 Gold Glove winners was 2011 when Joey Votto and that dude Brandon Phillips took home the Gold Gloves that year. So certainly an improvement, Nick. And I think that that's interesting that, we knew that was going to be a priority, but the question becomes, you can have all the defense in the world, but if you can't score a run to win the game, then it doesn't matter. And Brian Hayes has not been great offensively. He's never going to be, I don't think. But he can be a somewhat average or just below average offensive player and still be extremely valuable to this team. We've covered that ad nauseum at this point. But there were a lot of decisions this year on the defensive side that left us scratching our heads. Things like the amount of play that Santiago Espinal got, especially early on in the season, right? So there's the give and take of finding that proper balance and, putting in defensive replacements in the 5th or 6th inning seems premature at times, and sometimes felt like it came back to bite Tito in the butt. And so there's got to be that balance. I do agree that defensively they were much better in 2025, but what we're seeing in the postseason and what we're seeing throughout baseball is that runs and power matter. And so how the Reds supplement that defense with offense in 2026 will be the key storyline of this offseason as we move forward. What's your next point for positivity around Tito?
The bullpen. I think overall he did a really good job managing the bullpen. Ironically enough, the first game of the season was the worst probably example of that with Ian Jabot coveted for the save. But overall, I think the Reds bullpen significantly outperformed any realistic expectation. Kind of piece that together, and even, like really felt like ran Santillan and Pagan into the ground. But then at the end of the year, you know what? I'll give him credit for. He adjusted on Pagan. Because we thought Pagan was toast. At least I did. I don't remember. It was like late July, early August. I thought this guy's done. And he started putting him on a different type rest schedule. Wouldn't run him out there, I think, more than 2 days in a row. And Pagan was absolutely incredible the last 6-7 weeks of the season. So shout out to him. And Alexis Diaz. This is the one thing that I know for certain that Terry Francona did that my guy, David Bell, would not have done. And I think Francona deserves some credit for. He walked in on the spring trading and he said, that guy is not my closer. And we were all kind of shocked at that. And given the way that Alexis Diaz season went, if Diaz had gone to the Dodgers and dominated, okay, I would have been, we all would have come with pitchforks at Tito, but he didn't. He didn't pitch well, didn't do anything for the Dodgers. Looks like his career is completely in shambles right now at this point. Not saying it's, completely unfixable, but there's no doubt that Emilio Pagan was the better option to be the closer than Alexis Diaz. Francona saw that right away, and I think that was a reason why the Reds made the playoffs.
Yeah, and honestly, I think when you think about what the makeup of this bullpen was, I think Terry honestly got even more out of the bullpen than anyone could have imagined. You talk about guys that overperformed in 2025 compared to expectations, and Tony Santillan's one of the first that comes to mind. Obviously, there were high hopes for him, don't get me wrong, but for him to come out and be one of the most dominant pitchers in baseball was certainly not an expectation. The way Emilio Pagan performed in the closer role was not within expectations. Hell, he didn't even have him closing opening day. So obviously the expectations weren't there. You even look at guys like Graham Ashcraft and the way he closed out the season. You look at guys like Connor Phillips and the way that he closed out the season. And there's a lot of hope for moving forward with this bullpen because of some of the talent that they have coming back. But to your point, I also think that Tito very clearly doesn't like guys who can't throw strikes. And so towards the end of the season, we started to see Zach Maxwell, who was sitting on the major league roster and never got into games. That was obviously one of the big concerns for Zach Maxwell in the minor leagues. And when we brought him up to the major leagues, even was throwing strikes. Now, he didn't really struggle at the major league level. He didn't walk a whole lot of guys, but Tito wasn't about to take that risk, not this year, as they were trying to make a playoff push. So certainly think that there was a lot of guys who got used maybe more than we would have liked. But to your point, they stepped up, they got the job done, and Tito managed the bullpen, I think, pretty effectively for the most part, outside of a couple of games here and there that kind of got away from him in different ways. And I think that was one thing that I would think moving into 2026, we'd think through as a pitching staff and for Tito is how do we make sure that things don't get away from us so quickly that we're unprepared to address it, right? There were some games that were close. All of a sudden, the opposing team gets 2 or 3 runs on the board and we're just left kind of holding our tails and not having a plan. So that would be certainly something that I hope is improved for 2026, but some of those things you just can't avoid. All right. Point number 3, Nick, what do you got?
This is one that is debatable for sure. And I would even debate it a little bit of myself. I think there's some aspects of it that went too far, but I think the overarching thing was probably a positive. And certainly the people that were around the Reds that I've talked to, they believe in this full-heartedly. And that was the accountability that Francona got. If you talk to anyone around the Reds, they would say that it was night and day with what it was from and the David Bell tenure to the 2025 season. And I definitely think there was some of that was absolutely needed. And there was certainly was a level of that was reached. And then I'll add a side point to that as well. Is their ability to flip the script quickly was another thing that certainly was a reason that this team somehow stuck into the playoffs, because boy, did they look dead 10, 15 times over the year. Did they lose some of the most deflating losses that you could possibly lose? But the next day they quickly turned the page. And I think that was definitely something, because you heard it almost echoed in every post-game interview from a player. It was basically like reciting what Tito would say about, just on to the next day, on to the next day. And I think that definitely was something that was a positive overall, although there was some pieces of it that I think were negative.
Yeah, I think accountability plays a big part into why guys like playing for Terry Francona, right? And we've heard it since forever that he is a player's manager essentially, and that guys love to play for Terry Francona. And I think part of it is because they know that he's kind of the down home guy that they can get along with and just talk baseball, and he's going to be totally like one of the guys, right? But the other side is that they know that in the clubhouse, he's going to take care of business. And if that means holding guys accountable, that he's there to make sure that that's done. And it's not left to the team leaders to make that happen. Now, I think there has to be some sort of clubhouse environment where guys can feel comfortable going to other guys and holding them accountable and having those conversations. But knowing that your manager is going to do that and take care of business certainly takes a lot of weight off of those veteran guys who can then focus on just how to be a professional and how to handle the game and how to be ready for making the big push towards the playoffs versus having to worry about holding a guys accountable. So totally on board with that. I think, as you mentioned, which we're going to get into in just a minute, maybe that went a little bit too far. But before we get to the bad, Nick, I want to take a quick break and get a word from our sponsors.
Deep South Commodities is a proud supporter of Chatterbox Reds and our Deep Drive of the Day, and DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC. And we also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.
All right, so let's get into the bad. Well, let's be honest, Nick, probably why a lot of the people that are watching this right now on Monday are watching it. They want to hear us tear into Tito. They want us talk about how bad he was. They want to hear about all the negatives. Well, I don't know that we're going to do all of that, but let's have an honest conversation about some of the negative things that we thought Terry brought to the Reds in 2025. Do the same thing that we had before. Nick's got 3 items that we're going to talk about. Nick, let's start with number 1.
It was so old school, Craig. Oh my God. I can't believe that in 2025, the Reds were managed in the manner they were at times. Just some brutal things with just things that were said, the bunting, the bunt culture, nothing better than the Noelvi Marte trying to lay down a bunt in that Dodgers game. And that was just like, felt like the symptom of this culture of moving the runner over at all cost. Just it was brutal to watch as anyone who even remotely dabbles in like analytics or anything like that. It was that. And I think the biggest issue that I see, just like the most frustrating part of this, is like, I have a lot of off-season conversation in our Discord with buddies and stuff, and it's like every player that I want the Reds to add this offseason, I say, all right, well, is it a Tito-proof move? Because it feels like you have to like Tito-proof the roster. And the thing that I think is the most concerning is that it feels, and there was an interview at the NASCAR game in Bristol, the whatever it was called, where Francona was on Intentional Talk, and he said, "Oh, it was a breath of fresh air. They let me run things my own way." And I'm paraphrasing, that's something, but that was the intent of what he said. It was like, "Oh, I finally get to run things. They're not butting in." And the longer that the season went on with Francona, the more it felt to me that Francona's leash in Cleveland was not like it was in Cincinnati. He did not have as much of a say. And given the fact that Cleveland's done pretty well after Francona left, I can't sit here and say that they're necessarily missing him in Cleveland. I'm not saying he's a terrible, atrocious manager or anything, but I don't think that the success that he had in Cleveland was the way it was managed the same way that it was in Cincinnati this past year.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you mentioned the bunting, but look no further than Gavin Lux as a prime example of this old school managing that you're talking about, right? I mean, Gavin Lux batting cleanup, starting in the cleanup hole 21 times, batting third 6 times, second 21 times, batting fifth 60 times. Like Gavin Lux in today's day and age is not a guy that should be batting in the top 5 at any point. And yet he spent, if my math is correct, 108 of his 127 games starting in the top 5 spots in the lineup. And, you know, all due respect to Gavin Lux, certainly had a good enough year offensively and got on base 350, but his slugging was 374. I mean, just not a guy that you would expect to be towards the top of the lineup. And Tito continued to put him up there night in and night out because he was a Tito guy, right? And that kind of leads us into this next point, Nick. And Tito certainly had his guys.
Yeah, I mean, like Santiago Espinal was certainly a guy, and there was players that weren't his guy, and the favoritism. And I think even the biggest Tito supporters would even admit that there was some favoritism that was played this past season, which is kind of wild for a guy that's so beloved. It almost doesn't really feel like it makes sense at times, but the complete absolute benching demotion, I don't know how much of a say. I'm not going to speculate on it, but it certainly feels like there's a possibility with Will Benson. It was just nuts for a team that had so little offensively. You had a guy that was putting up incredible exit velocity numbers, barrel numbers, expected stats, everything you want. And it's not just me looking at StatCast data. There was the quote from Austin Hayes, where Austin Hayes basically said, Will Benson is doing everything right. I'm proud of him for the approach. He's hitting the ball harder than anyone, just is not getting the results. And like went on, like out of the blue, went on this big thing praising Will Benson. And then for him just to basically not play the rest of the season, I feel like it hurt this team. And there was just a whole lot of other situations as well. Guys like Rhys Hines didn't get the same opportunities. And when you watch these playoff games, it's like it is really hard to win without hitting home runs. The Seattle Mariners, like in the games that they won, there was all stat about how they whiffed like 5 times more than the Blue Jays. They were swinging and miss, but they hit a bunch of home runs and they won the games. And for the Reds, like I'm not saying Will Benson is a solution. I'm not saying Rhys Hines is a for sure solution. I'm not saying CES is a for sure solution, but you have got to have someone, and you got to start trying guys out in those spots. Because if you're going to go all in on the defense at third base and shortstop and second base and center field, and I know Ellie had a lot of errors, but I hope you understand my point here, angry people. You have to maximize your corner outfield spots, your first base, and your DH with guys that can mash. And the Reds did not have enough of those guys, and it felt like they didn't even really try to have guys that had the ability to be that in those spots.
So let me ask you a question, Nick, and it kind of goes back to what we've already talked about. Okay. take Will Benson aside. I think that one is a very clear, obvious, like benching scenario. He got mad at him for not running out that what ended up being a triple instead of a home run or whatever. I think Tito overreacted to that. Will got the short end of the stick. How much of the rest of it? You talk about guys like Sal Stewart. You talk about guys like Santiago Espinal. Some of these guys who either played more than you would have liked or less than you would have liked. How much of it is the favoritism or over accountability per se, and how much of it is just this old school nature of Terry not valuing power?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the exact science to that, Craig, but um, it's just like South. You watch the postseason games. Like, just take the postseason games. You have Will Benson come in. We were watching live, me and Trace. Like, Yamamoto had just been Yamamoto the whole game. Will Benson cold. I don't even know if he'd picked up a bat in the last week. Comes up and draws a walk. It's like it was the most quality at bat of the night. Sal Stewart didn't play in game one. Game two comes out and drives in the first run. Looks like a dude that absolutely belongs. And it's just so many of those type of guys just didn't get the same opportunities that flat out lesser players and certainly players with significantly lower ceilings had. And that's just the thing that's I don't know, the most frustrating. And the most frustrating thing too is that we have a guy like Will Benson now that we get to the end of the season, and once again, we don't know what Will Benson is. And if Benson would have played every day in August and September, we'd at least have a better idea. All right. If it, either you're not going to keep going over for a full season with this big gap in StatCast data where it says, man, you're hitting the ball really, really hard, but you're not getting the results. The gap will eventually close. Either Will Benson's numbers will go up or the StatCast numbers will drop. And we'd have a more understanding. Say, all right, well, I guess he just had a good couple months swinging the bat with bad luck on top of it versus, all right, hey, the numbers that were telling us he's hitting the ball really hard. Well, he actually, that's kind of the player that he's becoming. And that's we just have another year where we have another player where we just have no idea what he is.
Yeah. Interesting. Which kind of points to your whole Josh Bell thing the other day. StatCast numbers.
People
a little bit better
take.
on Josh Bell. Yeah, I know. I saw the reaction, and some of our good friends calling you out, even though it was clearly taken out of context in terms of just a under the radar kind of guy. People taking it as we should go sign Josh Bell. That's not exactly what Nick was saying, but all right. Last final negative thing in your eyes about year one with Terry Francona.
Well, again, I don't know how much of this is Terry Francona. I really don't. I think some of this is bad luck, but it's part of the story. It was just the blown leads, the lack of comeback wins, the extra innings. The extra innings, I think he definitely deserves some blame because of the approach in extra innings. And the quote from Nick Krall just absolutely infuriated me to where, we're going to look at this in the offseason. Like, it was like last week. It's like, why are we not? Or maybe it was Francona. I don't remember which one of them said it, but whoever said it, it was like the week left in the season. It's like, why? Look at it right now. But 3-12 in extra innings, 40 blown leaves. That was 4 more than any other playoff team and about 5 more than Major League average. Well, if you're just an average team in terms of blowing leads, that would have been an 88-win team, Craig. And I think we would have overall felt a lot differently about this team going into the next year if literally just they were an average team in terms of not blowing as many leads. And how much of that is Francona, I don't know. But if that was David Bell, I think everyone would say it was 100% his fault. So it's at least worth pointing up as a negative of this past season.
Yeah, 15 extra inning games and double-digit innings in extra innings that you didn't score the Manfred man. And certainly that's approach, which is trickled down from the whole season. But I think, honestly, the entire conversation, blown leads, lack of comebacks, extra innings, it all comes down to approach. And, we talked about it during the season about how unlikely it is with as good as pitchers are today for you to be able to string together enough base hits to be able to score runs in volume. I can really only think of like 2 or 3 innings this entire season where the Reds really strung together like multiple hits and scored multiple runs because of it, versus hitting the home run, hitting the ball out of the park and scoring a run that way. It only takes one home run. It takes sometimes 3 or 4 hits to score a run. And when the MLB average is you're getting a 1 hit in every 4 at bats, it's really hard to imagine stringing together 4 in an inning. So I think it all comes down to approach, which obviously was Chris Valleca and this hitting staff and, Tito's message as well. But I know a lot of people had a adverse reaction when it was released that the entire coaching staff was invited back for 2026. And so unfortunately, I think this approach isn't going anywhere. Hopefully they can supplement it with a couple power bats that they allow to just kind of let it rip versus trying to bring in a power bat and having them, adjust to the Valleca way, I guess is what I'll say. So imagine Kyle Schwarber, knock on wood, find a way to sign Kyle Schwarber and you bring him in and have Chris Valleca try to take him under his wing to hit the Reds way, in for a lot of disappointment. So, all right. So run back real quick. Positives, defense, bullpen, accountability. Negatives, the old school style, favoritism of players, and the blown leads, lack of comeback wins, and extra innings. Add it all up now for me, Nick. Give me your final grade for year 1 with Terry Francona.
Yeah, I think there's a notion from a lot of people to say, made the playoffs, he has to get a high grade for that. And I think that's complete garbage before I give my grade. David Bell in 2023 won 82 games with an atrocious, and I mean atrocious pitching staff. Won 82 games. Reds won 83 games just because the Mets collapsed. And the Reds played well down the stretch and did their part to get in the playoffs. But I certainly don't think what Tito did in 2025 was any more impressive than that. So my final grade, I've wrestled with this a lot. My head wanted to be like D- right off the rip. I maybe felt like maybe I should be a little higher. I'm giving him a flat C. No plus, no minus, flat C right on it. And hopefully it can improve in 2026.
Okay. That's an interesting approach. After teasing earlier that you weren't going to give him an F, you just went all the way up to a C. That's fine. Look, here's the thing. And obviously you mentioned it. Reds made the playoffs. I think a lot of us still had even higher hopes for this Reds team than what it was. And you look at how they performed in the postseason, which, I think they fought, but at the end of the day, they were just clearly outmanned. You look at how they got into the playoffs to begin with, which was, quite frankly, it being handed to them by the New York Mets. You just look at the entirety of the season, and I think I'm probably in like the D+ range, Nick. And I think it's because I think there's more talent in this organization than what they even used, right? You talk about guys like Blake Dunn, who tore it up at AAA, Reese Hines, who didn't really get opportunities, Will Benson, who sat on the bench for a majority of the season, and what this team could have been. And as much as I think Terry Francona's culture played into the fact that the Reds made it to the playoffs, I think his management of the roster and of this team, and as we continue to hear more and more about that from behind the scenes, even more and more, my grade kind of slips a little bit more. And so I'm going to go with a D+ for now. But man, it could have been a lot lower if this team didn't sneak into the playoffs, if I'm being brutally honest with you. So, all right, real quick. We just did a look back to 2025. Now let's look ahead. Tito's got 2 years left on his contract with a club option, I believe, for a 4th is what I've heard. Give me reason to hope with Tito moving forward, and give me a reason why maybe I should be concerned with Tito at the helm moving forward.
Well, the biggest reason for hope is I still think the Reds have a pretty good core. Whether I know a lot of people are frustrated or not, they still have a really, really good core. They have a core that I think a lot of teams would die to be in the spot of the Reds. And no matter who your manager is, if everything starts really shaking out, if you start seeing Ellie be more of the Ellie that we saw through July, We see Matt McLean kind of be the guy that he was at spurts of last year. We see Sal Stewart kind of blossom into a big hitter. And then we see this rotation just continue to be dominant with the additions of Chase Byrne and Rhett Lowder, and hopefully some really good, smart, strategic adds this offseason. It really doesn't matter who the manager is. That team can improve. Now, my biggest hope is I hope that you get into the offseason and you start having some conversations, and the Reds front office flat out says, all right, we let you do things your way in season one. We're not going to be this whole, we're not micromanaging or anything, but here are the things that we want to see improved. And there's some sort of at least blending, Craig. There's at least some sort of, okay, it's not just going to all be Tito's way or the highway. We're going to try to blend some of the things that Tito did that worked really well with also, hey, look, we got to play guys get the ball out of the ballpark at our DH spot. But I know this guy strikes out a little bit more than you like, but let's give him a shot because, man, could actually be a dude versus this other guy that's probably going to be out of the league in two years for sure. And just doesn't add, it has no ceiling at all. That would be my biggest reason for hope.
I think my biggest reason for hope is culture. And I said it earlier in a show that, you talked about favorites earlier. Will Benson may not be on this team in 2026. And I think that given Terry's treatment of him, given the culture that Terry's trying to build, that might actually, as much as I hate it on field, might actually play out in a positive way for the culture that Terry's trying to build. And we've seen what culture can do with the right pieces in place. Now the question becomes, can the right pieces be put in place with that culture? And will Tito allow a power hitter to be a power hitter if they fit in culture-wise versus, well, you're a power hitter, but culturally you're not a fit. And so we're going to move on. So I think the culture that he is trying to build is my reason for hope. But culture, like concern wise, like I have zero hope in him changing his approach. Like that, just in terms of what their focus is going to be on. I've said it 100 times now. When we do this live show reacting to the Luis Arraez signing, I just want you to remember all the times that I said it, because he is a perfect Tito guy. It's just the truth. And so when he's a Cincinnati Red in 2026, I want you to tip your cap to me and say, Craig, you were right. I hate it, but you were right. This is a Terry Francona signing. And we're just going to have to deal with the fact that Terry doesn't value power.
It's not happening. If it does, we'll do a live show. My head will be in the desk the entire time, and I'll just let you talk. I'm not even going to say anything.
All right. If you're watching on YouTube, please, in the comments, make sure you leave your grade for Terry Francona's first year. Let us know what your positives, what your negatives are. We'll be sure to check it out, and I'm sure we'll be responding with our feedback. If you're seeing a clip on social media, make sure you comment on that as well at CBox Sports on all the social media channels. And we look forward to hearing your opinions on year one with Terry Francona. And we'll see how many Fs we have, how many A's we have, and everywhere in between. And we appreciate the comments for sure. Nick, we teased this one for like the last 2 weeks, but what do we got coming up on Chatterbox Reds?
Well, coming up on Chatterbox Reds later this week, and it might be tomorrow. I'm not sure. I got to fine tune with my card. We're going to go through a list. There was 36 players listed by, you call it Spotrac. I thought it was Spot Track. I don't know what it is. Whatever it's called. They did a list of 36 players that they think could be traded this offseason. I'm going to kind of go through some of those with Mike. Some of them will go a lot quicker than others. Like, I don't think the Reds are trading for Mitch Keller of the Pirates. We'll probably skip through him. But we'll kind of talk about each one of at least the hitters. Would this guy make sense for the Reds? And some of them that we really like, okay, what kind of package would it take? So we'll kind of go through that. And then, of course, we got all kinds of content here on Chatterbox Sports. It was a brand new episode of The Flying Line. They did a live show Monday night. It's on YouTube and in your podcast feed. Chatterbox Bearcats, they did 2 shows over the weekend. basketball and football had a great weekend. So be sure to check out those guys' work on YouTube and on and everywhere in your podcast feed. Off the Bench, 10 a.m. to 11. Stone Shield, so 11 to noon, Monday through Friday on Chatterbox Sports, also available over your podcast. And links to all that stuff is in the episode notes below. So hopefully some content for everyone during the offseason. We'll continue to do as much Reds content as we can. But Craig, tell everyone
You're not
about...
even going to mention Chatterbox Bengals? Oh,
I
you're
was
going to turn it over to me?
I was going to turn it over.
All right, all right.
Craig, you tell the people about all the great stuff you guys are doing with Chatterbox Bengals.
Well, shout out to Reed Mouse. I know he's running around with his head chopped off, it feels like every day with running the video screens that is also part of the Chatterbox umbrella, whatever. So he's doing a lot of that and still making time to host Off the Bench and talk Cincinnati Bengals. And obviously the Bengals had a huge win on Thursday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers, now just one game back in the win column there in the AFC North as they fight their way back from a slow start behind Jake Browning. Joe Flacco has them on a positive trajectory. Now, join us half an hour before kickoff every weekend. I was almost going to say every Sunday, but Thursday, Sunday, Monday, whenever they play, we're live 30 minutes before kickoff for a pregame show. We're live throughout the entire game, giving you play-by-play, live reaction, and more. We do a halftime show during that, and then we're live right afterwards, breaking it all down for you, talking about top performers, bottom performers sometimes, and giving you the whole details on how the game went. And, of course, that's available in your podcast feed the following morning as well. So we appreciate you checking it out and cheering on your Cincinnati sports teams with some of their biggest fans, if we're being honest. The chats are always amazing. We appreciate everybody coming and supporting us and hanging out with us as we talk about some of our favorite topics, which is Cincinnati sports.
And can I ask everyone a favor? I know everyone that's watching and listening has been a loyal listener. I've already begged you enough, and you've done it. You've went and you gave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or listen podcast. Go do that for our other shows, specifically Chatterbox Bengals. Those guys are really trying to grow that podcast brand and ratings. It really, really does help get that stuff pushed out. So if you could leave everyone a 5-star review wherever you can, it doesn't have to be something long. Just say great content. Every content could just be Nick is handsome. That works for every show as well.
Daniel with his great show, guys, every single time. Hey, we appreciate it.
It's elite stuff. But Craig, I gotta say, I like Joe Flacco. One of the most likable Cincinnati athletes of all time.
He's so chill. Like, he really, like, we talk about like Cool Joe and all this other stuff with Joe Burrow and, you know, give these nicknames, but he's legitimately so even keeled. You watch him. They had the side by side of Joe Burrow and Joe Flacco reacting to the Evan McPherson game-winning field goal on Thursday night. And you think that Joe Burrow is even keeled? You would have swore Joe Flacco was sitting on the sideline of a game that they just lost by 30 points. He was so chill, so even keeled, didn't care at all. It's been really fun to hear him kind of talk about this journey. And, you know, he talked about the fact that he got to spend this weekend with his family, which is great. He's got young kids. And so glad that he got a chance to do that with the long weekend and the Thursday night game. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And Reed's talked a lot about the importance of getting your playmakers the ball. And I got to tell you, Joe Flacco certainly trusts his playmakers. Jamar Chase with 23 targets on Thursday night. So he's definitely getting them the ball. One other note real quick. We are under 200 subscribers from 20,000. And that's been a goal of ours for the last week or two as we kind of approach this. We're really trying to get there. Would love to get there sooner, but if not by the end of October, I think that's totally realistic to do. Would really appreciate if you enjoyed this content, make sure you do click that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined, maybe even join as a member of Nutcutter Nation. That helps support us and continue to bring you great content all year round. But we appreciate you all for tuning in. Don't forget, leave us a comment about your grade on Terry Francona. Subscribe, like the